We call violence war. We call blood sacrifice. And we call loss necessary. For thousands of years, war has been part of our history. For thousands of years, we have died for our beliefs. At the edge of the Baltic Sea is a region called the Baltic States, and within these states is a small country named Estonia. Starting from the 1800s, Estonia has waged its own war against two major countries with nothing but the power of their voices, leading to a series of conflicts and compromises that won their independence. During the 1880s, a European struggle began, involving numerous invasions into Estonia by Tsarist Russia. The first symbol of compromise was the Treaty of Tartu, signed in 1920 by the USSR, which allowed for Estonia's independence. Conflict once again arose as the Soviet Union broke the treaty and invaded in the early 1900s. However, the Estonians fought back in a series of peaceful protests later known as the Singing Revolution. Although the Singing Revolution led to Estonia's independence, Estonia's recovery and recreation of its nation was hard to maintain. Eventually, the Singing Revolution sparked the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and the conflict that stemmed from the failed compromise of the Treaty of Tartu set a brilliant example on how nonviolent protest could win one country's independence. The history between the USSR and Estonia dated far back into the Great Northern War of the 1900s, when the Treaty of Neustadt in 1721 established Russia as the dominant power of the Baltic Sea. This marked the beginning of its drive towards conquering Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. However, once Russia succeeded in its goal and Estonia was placed under its harsh rule, the Estonians almost immediately rebelled. The conflict eventually escalated into the Estonian War of Independence, a war fought between Russia and Estonia. At the turning point of the war on January of 1919, Estonia drove the Red Army out of their lands. 3 months later, the Estonian Constituent Assembly forms to act as the official Estonian government that would guide Estonia towards its new independence. On December 5, 1919, the first round of peace talks between Russia and Estonia started in Tartu, Estonia, leading to the signing of the Treaty of Tartu between Russia and the Estonian Constituent Assembly on February 2, 1920. The Treaty of Tartu was Russia's formal recognition of Estonia's independence and acted as the first major symbol of compromise between the two opposing nations, promising prosperity in the next 18 years for the people of Estonia and rebuilding their confidence in Estonia's ability to govern itself. However, this period of security ended in 1939, when Joseph Stalin of the Soviet Union and Adolf Hitler of Nazi Germany signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Non-Aggression Pact, dividing European land in half to be conquered by each country. Completely breaking the former Treaty of Tartu and starting another series of conflicts, the Baltic states were subsequently placed under the USSR's regime in 1941. Throughout the new years of Soviet rule, the Soviet system was specifically designed to stop the development of the Baltic states. In the same year, Germany broke the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact and invaded Estonia, although the Soviet Union regained control of Estonia 3 years later on June 1944. Through liberating Estonia from Nazi Germany, the Soviets believed Estonia would be forever in their debt and was obligated to work for them. The Singing Revolution began in the Song Festival of 1969, when the entire audience at the festival chanted and sang their traditional songs, such as Land of My Fathers, Land That I Love, rather than the songs designed by the USSR. This moment marked the very beginning of the Singing Revolution, a 20-year rebellion by the people of Estonia against their main oppressor, the Soviet Union. As Mikhail Gorbachev of the USSR rose to power, Estonia was handed its biggest opportunity for freedom when he instigated his reform policy of glasnost, a law that gave more freedom and human rights to the people he ruled over. In light of this new policy, Estonian activists staged a protest in the town hall square at Tallinn in 1988. Several thousand people attended, where the activists spoke out against the communist regime. It was the first time someone had ever dared to criticize the Soviet Union and left without severe punishment. In the next Singing Festival of 1988, thousands of Estonians waved banned Estonian flags and sang. That September, the protests rose to their peak at a gathering called the Song of Estonia, where speeches were delivered with a fiery call to action. One of the most shocking demonstrations in the Singing Revolution came on August 23, 1989, and gained international fame. Over 2 million Estonians, Latvians, and Lithuanians held hands in one single continuous human chain that stretched across the entire Baltic states, an event known as the Baltic Chain, representing their unity and determination in their fight for freedom. The singing revolution came to a close in the summer of 1990, when the failed coup d'etat against Gorbachev led to the weakening of the Soviet Union as soon as Russia drew out. Although Soviet troops were sent to Estonia by the hardline communists in a final attempt to cut it off from the Western world, they were outnumbered and withdrew a day later. The USSR ultimately collapsed after this act. Shortly after their main oppressors were gone, Estonia officially declared the continuation of their old independence a year later on August 20th, 1991. Estonia's fight with foreign countries was over. Estonia's continual fight for independence would not have been possible without the Treaty of Tartu, although it was a failed compromise. The brief 18-year period of national prosperity in Estonia that resulted from the treaty solidified Estonia's trust in its ability to be an independent nation, allowing the Estonians to find the strength and faith in their country that they needed to continue a seemingly hopeless fight. The Treaty of Tartu and the Singing Revolution became the ultimate factors for Estonia's independence, an effect of the conflict and compromise that occurred instantaneously. However, Estonia needed to completely reconstruct itself with its new independence. The nation could no longer rely on the Soviet Union, although the majority of their economy and international trade had been dependent on the USSR. The introduction of the Estonian crown in 1992, in place of the useless Soviet form of currency, did help to resolve some of Estonia's economic crises, and they were now one of the most economically stable European countries in the world. Although Estonia became an independent nation after its conflict with the Soviet Union, they still have had some struggles with the USSR. When the Soviet Union recognized Estonia as an independent nation, they established a new border that is different from the one previously established in the Treaty of Tartu. The conflict over this new issue has been long and drawn out, lasting even to the present day. As part of its gradual modernization and entry into the international stage, Estonia was later admitted into the United Nations and then the European Union and NATO in 2004 as one of the first former Soviet Union countries to do so. One of Estonia's most dominant effects on the world was the role it played in the downfall of major totalitarian countries such as the Soviet Union. The first Soviet region to begin protesting the rule of the USSR was only Estonia, although they were later followed by the rest of the Baltic states. More of the 15 territories in the USSR began to mimic Estonia's revolutionary stance after the country's successful independence. South of the USSR, the Republic of Azerbaijan, Ukraine, Belarus, and other Central Asian republics initiated their fight for independence as well. These demonstrations, inspired by Estonia, showed Gorbachev that he could no longer expect regions under his authority to cooperate without question. Subsequently, the elimination of the USSR brought about major changes in history, such as the end of the Cold War and the fall of the Berlin Wall, eventually signifying the end of the Eastern Bloc.
What the Singing Revolution demonstrated was that Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania could act without being punished. And when those three republics were able to make a political stand through nonviolent means, it demonstrated to everybody else in the Soviet Union that Soviet power was very hollow.
Most importantly, Estonia's conflict with the Soviet Union serves as an exemplary model to the rest of the world. The rebellions of the world have set a pattern in which the common expectations for a fight for change are death, blood, and sacrifice. Yet Estonia defied all of this in their conflict. Throughout the course of the Singing Revolution, not a single person was harmed.
The world should study how did Norway do it, how did Estonia do it, how did Slovakia do it peacefully, as an example for what to do later on.
Defying all odds, Estonia has struggled through war, oppression, and defeat in their journey for freedom, declaring independence not once, but twice. Estonia redefines thousands of years in war history. Unlike the rest of the world, Estonia calls violence harmful, blood shameful, and loss unnecessary.